Good morning, everybody. This is Stephen Pugh of the Home Bible College. It is December the 3rd, and we're beginning our readings in the book of Daniel the prophet. We're in chapter 1. Now, in this wonderful prophetic book, Daniel begins by recounting the story of his capture and the transportation to the city of Babylon. This occurred in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah. It was the Lord who delivered him into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also took the holy vessels of the temple and put them in the house of his God in the land of Shinar. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, who was master of the eunuchs, to select some of the children of the king and of the princes, and he was specifically to look for children who were perfect specimens of health, children who were well liked, skilled in solving problems, very bright in areas of knowledge, having some understanding of the sciences, and able to have the confidence to hold their own in the company of the king. At this particular time, Daniel was of the age of 16, and they were selected to be taught the language and education of the Chaldeans. The king also appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and the wine, and they were to study for 3 years, and afterward they were to come into the king's court. At this stage, he would probably place them in positions of authority over the Jews and possibly over his own people. Among the children that were selected was Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The king gave them new names. Daniel was called Belteshazzar, Hananiah was called Shadrach, Mishael was called Meshach, and Azariah was called Abednego. Daniel had been forced from his home. They had changed his language, and they had changed his name, and they had set him on an educational program not of his own choosing. All these things he could not change, but he was not going to allow himself to change his diet. There were two things here. First, the possibility of food offered to idols, and secondly, the eating of non-kosher food. Daniel decided that he would not defile himself by eating the food and drinking the wine from the king's table. So Daniel requested that the master of the eunuchs, that he might be allowed to pass on this diet. Daniel was very much liked and loved by the master of the eunuchs, so he said to Daniel, "I am afraid of the king. He might hurt me if you refuse the king's food." Now this was difficult for Daniel. It's one thing to make a decision that affects only himself, but this affects somebody else that he cares for. So Daniel answered Melzar, "Who has been appointed over him? Prove us to yourselves. Give us 10 days grace. Let us eat pulse and water. Then after 10 days come and look on us, and if we're not more healthy than when we eat the king's meat." Daniel knew diet. He knew the effects of a diet of pulse and water. And after 10 days, Daniel was vindicated. He looked so much better in health. As a result of the determination of these 4 young men to keep themselves faithful to the dietary requirements of the Mosaic law, God blessed them in giving them knowledge and skill and wisdom. And to Daniel, God gave him understanding of all dreams and visions. Now, visions are waking dreams. After 3 years, Nebuchadnezzar found that these 4 young men to be outstanding in all matters of wisdom and understanding. In fact, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers of his kingdom. And of course, at this time, Daniel was 19 years of age. It's amazing, isn't it? In the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, with Daniel at his side, he dreamed a dream in which he was deeply troubled. Dreams in Scripture are God's way of getting the attention of men in the absence of Scripture. Therefore, they often come to Gentiles. Nebuchadnezzar called his wise men and told them that they'd had a dream and they were to tell him its meaning. But he was not going to tell them of the dream. None of them could tell the meaning of the dream, because none of them knew what it was. He also said, "If you don't tell me the dream, then I will destroy you and your houses." The wise men criticized the king for his harshness, but this made him furious, so he issued a decree to kill all the wise men, including Daniel. When Arioch came to kill Daniel, he asked him why it was so urgent, and Daniel requested an audience with the king. Daniel asked for time to inquire of the Lord. Daniel and his 3 friends pray to God to make this known, and in the night Daniel has a vision of the king's dream, and Daniel blesses God for it. In his prayer is a model of Daniel's understanding. Daniel comes before the king, not only gives the interpretation, but also gives its meaning. It's interesting that Daniel refers to God as the God of heaven. This is consistently the name used to describe God, to describe God to Gentiles. Daniel explains that the dream is a picture of the latter days, i.e. the days preceding the Messianic kingdom. Daniel also disclaims any personal wisdom in knowing these things. All glory goes to the Lord, the revealer of secrets. The dream was of a great statue made of various types of metal, a head made of gold, breasts of silver, a belly and thighs of brass, and legs of iron, and feet of iron and clay. And Daniel told of the stone that came and hit the feet of the clay and iron, causing the whole image to fall. Then Daniel explains that Nebuchadnezzar is the head of gold, and that there were 4 other empires that will arise after him. He also says that the God of heaven has set him up, and that others will follow. Then Daniel went on to say that God will establish a kingdom that will never be destroyed. Nebuchadnezzar honored Daniel and made him governor of Babylon and head of the wise men. Notice how old he is at this time. He's 19. Daniel requested that his 3 friends might take his post, and he would attend on the king, that is, sitting in the gate of the king. And the next thing that happened in this long and detailed story is that Nebuchadnezzar made a huge image, nearly 76 feet high and made of gold. And then it was commanded that whenever anyone heard any music, they would turn and bow to the image. Those who did not bow would be thrown into the furnace. Now the 3 friends of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, that were set over the affairs of Babylon, refused to bow down. They were brought before the king, and they gave their answer to the charge against them. They said, they are very careful to answer. They said, "Our God, who we serve, is able to deliver us. But even if he does not, then we will not bow down to his image." So the furnace is heated up 7 times hotter, and they're thrown into it hand and foot, bound hand and foot. The fire killed the men who threw them in. And then as the king is astonished, because in the fire he can see 4 men loose and walking, and the 4th is like unto the Son of Man. Then the king called on them to come out of the fire, and they came out completely unharmed, even without the smell of fire on their clothing. And then the king worshipped the God of heaven, and he made a decree that all the earth was to worship the God of heaven. Now that's the passage, and there is so much in this passage, absolutely so much. I could spend an hour or 2 going through it with you, but I just want to bring to you my password. Found at the very beginning, Daniel was just a young man of 16. Take a look at what it says in verse 8. It says, but. You see, when everything goes against you, and they change your name, and change your home, and change your education, and change your family, and change everything about you, change your clothes, change your language, change everything about you. He says, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Daniel was a man of purpose. He was a man after God's own heart. Well, there we are. That's the beginning of this fantastic book, the book of Daniel. I'm really looking forward to be going through this with you this week. Have a great day and look forward to speaking to you tomorrow. Bye for now.